club with 36 league titles, one of the 10 biggest clubs on earth, owned by one of the wealthiest families in Europe. In 2023, it was docked 10 points and thrown out of European football. Not for a bribe, not for drugs, not for anything that happened on the pitch. It was punished for a number typed into a spreadsheet, signed off and published in the accounts of a company listed on the stock market. The number was 72 million euros, supposedly the value of a footballer. But by the club's own private notes, everyone involved knew it was a fiction. This is the story of how Juventus, the richest, most successful club in Italy, allegedly conjured hundreds of millions of euros of profit out of thin air. How they got away with it for years, and what happened when the prosecutors finally came knocking. This is Front Office Investigations. The deal that made no sense. Start with the deal that broke the whole thing open. Summer 2020, Juventus and Barcelona agree a swap. A midfielder called Arthur goes from Barcelona to Juventus, valued at 72 million euros. Going the other way, Miralem Pjanić moves from Juventus to Barcelona, valued at 60 million. Only about 12 million euros in actual cash ever changes hands. Now, here's the problem. Neither player was worth anything like those numbers. Pjanić was 30 years old and past his best. Arthur would play barely a season at Juventus before being shipped out on loan. No sane buyer pays 60 or 70 million for either. So why those exact enormous figures? Because the numbers were never about the players. They were about the accounts. And to see the trick, you need to understand the one piece of accounting that runs this entire sport. How to invent money. When a football club buys and sells players, it uses two different rules, and the gap between them is the loophole. When a club buys a player, it does not count the whole transfer fee in one go. It spreads the cost across the length of the contract. Accountants call this amortisation. Sign a player for 40 million on a 4-year deal, and on the books that's just 10 million a year. The pain is drip-fed over years. When a club sells a player, it does the opposite. It books the profit immediately, all of it, right now. And the profit isn't the whole fee. It's the fee minus whatever value the player still has left on the books. That instant profit has a name in Italian, Plusvalenza, a capital gain. Put those two rules together and you can see the exploit. Take a player who's been at your club a few years. Most of his transfer fee has already been amortised away, so his value on your books is now tiny. Sell him, and almost the entire fee counts as instant clean profit today. Now do it as a swap. You and a friendly club agree to trade two players. You both name a big price. Because it's a swap, almost no real cash has to move. You're just exchanging paperwork. But on the books, magic happens. You both record a large instant profit today, and you both take on a new cost you can quietly spread over the next 4 years. On paper, both clubs just got richer. In reality, nothing happened. Two players changed shirts and 12 million euros moved. That is the Arthur Pjanić deal. 72 million and 60 million were never valuations. They were the size of the profit each club wanted to print. Barcelona needed to plug a hole in their accounts. Juventus needed the same. So they agreed on the numbers that suited both and called it a football transfer. Why a giant needed to cheat. Here's the question that makes this story bigger than one dodgy swap. Why would Juventus, the richest, most successful club in the country, need to fake a profit at all? Because behind the trophies, the money was hemorrhaging out. In 2018, Juventus signed Cristiano Ronaldo for 116 million euros, the biggest transfer fee ever paid by an Italian club, on a salary that cost them somewhere around 57 million euros a year, gross. It was an all-in bet to finally win the Champions League. They never won it, and then the world shut down. COVID emptied the stadiums, and matchday income, tickets, hospitality, the lot collapsed. The result? For the 2021-22 financial year, Juventus posted a loss of 254 million euros, the largest single-year loss in the history of Serie A, And it wasn't a one-off. It was their 5th straight year in the red, with something close to €500 million lost across just 2 of those years. Now here's the pressure most fans never see. Juventus isn't only a football club, it's a public company listed on the Milan Stock Exchange. That means real shareholders, real investors, and financial statements the markets read. On top of that sits UEFA's financial fair play, rules that cap how much a club is allowed to lose over a rolling period. Record losses do 2 dangerous things at once. They spook your investors and they breach the rules that let you play in Europe. So a made-up profit isn't just vanity. It shrinks the loss on the page. It keeps the share price up. It keeps you inside UEFA's limits. The trick doesn't win you a trophy, it buys you time. The Black Book. In May 2021, the public prosecutor of Turin opened a criminal investigation, codename Prisma. And this is the shift that matters. These weren't football people arguing about whether a player was worth 60 million. These were fraud prosecutors asking a much colder question. Did a company listed on the stock market lie to its investors and to the regulator about how much money it had? What they found was damning. The league's own financial watchdog, Covisoc, had already flagged 62 suspicious transfers for questionable valuations. 42 of them involved Juventus. Prosecutors had wiretaps, Juventus directors recorded discussing the deals. They had what became known as a black book, allegedly kept by sporting director Fabio Paratici, said to contain the real numbers sitting behind the official ones. And then there was the single most damaging document of all, an internal note written by a Juventus director that read, "Excessive use of artificial plusvalenza," with an arrow drawn to the words immediate benefit and another to amortisation load. Read that again, because it's the whole case in one line. In their own handwriting, the profits were artificial, they knew the benefit was immediate, and they knew the cost was being buried in future years. That's the line between clever accounting and something darker. Not that Juventus inflated swap deals, half of football does. It's that their own documents suggest they knew exactly what they were doing and why. The reckoning. The fallout came fast. In November 2022, the entire Juventus board resigned at once. President Andrea Agnelli, a member of the dynasty behind Fiat and Ferrari, a man who'd run the club for over a decade. Vice President Pavel Nedved, a genuine club legend. All of them gone in a single night. Then the Italian Football Federation moved. Juventus were docked 15 points in January 2023. On appeal, the deduction was wiped, then reimposed weeks later at 10 points. It dropped them out of the Champions League places to 7th, which meant they lost the very European prize money the whole scheme was meant to protect. The trick, in the end, cost them the thing it was designed to save. UEFA added its own punishment, a financial settlement with a fine of up to €20 million, and, the real blow, exclusion from European competition for the 2023-24 season. They'd qualified for the Conference League. They were thrown out of it. Agnelli was banned from Italian football. So were other executives. The most powerful boardroom in Italian football had been dismantled. The crime that couldn't be proven. And now the twist, the smartest, strangest part of the entire story. The sporting punishment stuck. The points, the ban from Europe, the executive bans, all real, all enforced. But the criminal case, it quietly fell apart. Because the Plusvalenza charges ran headfirst into one impossible question. What is a footballer actually worth? If Juventus declare that Arthur is worth €72 million, and there is no official rulebook, no stock ticker, no fixed market price for a human being's football ability, then how does a prosecutor prove the number was a lie? A player isn't a share with a printed value. A valuation is an opinion, and you cannot easily jail someone for holding an opinion about a transfer fee. So the case ended in 2024 and 2025, not with a dramatic courtroom verdict, but with plea bargains, suspended sentences, and crucially, Agnelli's deal came with no admission of responsibility. Some executives were cleared entirely. Which leaves the most uncomfortable truth of the whole affair. The trick at the centre of it, two clubs agreeing on a fictional number to manufacture a profit, may be almost impossible to prosecute as a crime. Precisely because everyone does it and no one can say what the correct number ever was. The bigger con. So what does Juventus actually teach you? In our last investigation, a tiny club called Berry died because it had no money. Juventus is the mirror image. It had money, enormous money, and still couldn't make the numbers work. So it made the numbers up. Two clubs at opposite ends of football brought down by the same disease, the gap between what the accounts say and what is actually true. And here's the part that should stay with you. Plusvalenza is not some Juventus invention. It's baked into how the entire sport accounts for players. A system where profit can be conjured by two clubs simply agreeing on a fiction. Their own watchdog flagged dozens of clubs, not one. Juventus got caught and got punished, mostly because their own directors were careless enough to write the scheme down. So the next time you see a club post a healthy profit, and you look closer and find it's built not on real cash, but on player sales and swap deals, treat that profit like a magic trick. Ask the only question that matters. Where is the money actually? The richest club in Italy, owned by one of the wealthiest families in Europe, still ended up docked points, banished from Europe, and sat in front of fraud prosecutors, all over a spreadsheet. If it can happen to them, look very hard at whoever owns your club. The numbers always tell the truth in the end. You just have to know how to read them. Thanks for watching Front Office Investigations. See you next time.